Good evening, I'm Andrew Chang.
And I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Tonight, Ukraine braces for a new offensive, a battle for the east. And near the capital, our crew witnesses a search for closure.
COVID's comeback in Ontario could be worse than expected.
Yes, we're in the sixth wave.
But there's no plan to change course.
It's very scary. You're putting people's lives at risk.
What the next month could look like.
A fire rages through a century-old building in downtown Vancouver with people trapped inside.
You could see the flames, could hear people yelling.
And Canada's latest low-cost airline takes off.
Canada is littered with the shells of old low-cost carriers.
But in a crowded market, can it survive? This is The National. With thousands of Russian troops believed to be on the move towards eastern Ukraine, the war appears to be reaching a dangerous turning point.
And there are fears the relentless attacks on civilians could get worse. Those living near Russian-controlled areas in the east aren't taking any chances. They're getting out as fast as the trains will carry them, fleeing to the west, driven by fear of the violence they have already seen. Now, Russian troops have been gone from the city of Bucha near Kyiv for more than a week, but the evidence of atrocities there is still being unearthed. Chris Brown and his team visited Bucha, where war crimes investigators continue their very difficult work. And a warning, what they have found is disturbing and graphic.
War crime prosecutors know in towns the Russians occupied near Ukraine's capital, the atrocities they inflicted on civilians left hundreds dead. This is St. Andrew's Church in Bucha, where we saw investigators digging up bodies from a mass grave and then using a crane to lift them out of the ground. 44 bodies and counting. We'll conduct forensic examinations and record the facts of death, said war crimes prosecutor Andrei Tubar. We're gathering evidence of military aggression against our state, against our citizens. This work is being done very much in the open. There are no screens to hide the exhumations, and investigators do their preliminary examination where everyone can see. Yulia Blahodatna came looking for her husband Alexander. She told us he was shot by a Russian sniper while delivering food. He died at the hospital and she thinks he might have been put here. In their last chilling conversation, she says he told her there was no street to their home. There were so many bodies that he was afraid to drive over them. Since Russia's invasion, its army has killed countless civilians without achieving a single major military objective. But that may be about to change. After weeks of unrelenting bombardment, the strategic port city of Mariupol may finally be about to fall.
Mariupol zrujnований.
Mariupol has been destroyed, said President Vladimir Zelensky. There are tens of thousands of dead. A larger Russian offensive against the whole of the eastern Donbass region could come at any time. And in spite of horrific Russian attacks on railways, many people feel they have no other choice but to keep using them to get away. In Bucha, some of the destruction left by the Russians is being cleaned up, but so much awfulness remains. We passed a house with a man's body lying in the driveway. He too had been shot, his grieving wife told us, but had to be temporarily buried in their vegetable garden. His name, Mykola Samoilenko, will join the long list of victims of likely Russian war crimes. There's more confirmation that any peace deal is off until after the fight for Donbass is settled. Austria's president went to see Vladimir Putin, but came back empty-handed, and Ukraine's president says the only way that Russia will stop is if Ukraine's military makes them. Chris Brown, CBC News, Kyiv.
The Canadian government is taking aim at Russia's defense sector with a new round of sanctions. 33 new sanctions impose restrictions on organizations connected to Russia's military, either directly or indirectly, by prohibiting or freezing their assets. Since the invasion began, Canada has brought sanctions against more than 700 individuals and entities from Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus.
Now, the frustration is building for many Ukrainians seeking refuge in Canada. And here's an example of why. A mother fleeing the war is approved for a temporary visa, but her 4-year-old daughter is left in limbo. Julia Wong shows us how that uncertainty is bringing distress to so many families.
Two messages from them.
Andrew Shurik and Anya Demyanova have been glued to their laptop for weeks. Demyanova's sister-in-law Natalia and her 4-year-old daughter Anna fled Ukraine when the Russian invasion began. The couple is trying to bring them to Edmonton.
We told her that come to us for now because it's safer here.
Natalia's application was quickly approved, but there's been no response to little Anna's application, submitted nearly 3 weeks ago. The federal government says most applications will be processed within 14 days of receipt.
It's in limbo. I don't see how there is this gap and miscommunication, as I feel it's been pushed off to the side and it's been forgotten about.
Shurik says he checks in every day and tries to update Anna's application using an online form.
And again, wait the 5 days to get a generic response with no answer.
Natalia and Anna are waiting in Germany until Anna's application gets sorted out.
Can you help ask her what she thinks of the process to come to Canada?
It's frustrating because she doesn't understand why they looking to a 4-year-old girl that long.
This licensed immigration consultant says 10% of her files involve families split up during the application process.
They sometimes have the different process and timelines, meaning that some of the family members receive the response while the others are sitting there in limbo.
Immigration Canada says in a statement, many clients are eager to get their visas. It's experiencing unprecedented volume and is closely monitoring the functionality of its online portal. For now, the pair is focused on bringing their family to safety.
We don't know who to ask for help just to solve this problem. And we just want them to come here and be with us.
Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Well, turning now to COVID-19 in Canada. Ontario's chief medical officer held an update today, his first in a month, despite hospitalizations and COVID prevalence levels in wastewater climbing for weeks. But as Christine Birak explains, the one announcement many doctors were hoping would come did not.
With the virus ripping through Ontario, many have been waiting weeks to hear from this man.
It is clear that we are in the 6th wave of this pandemic.
Doctors say what's less clear is how the province plans to blunt this wave. Ontario's chief medical officer insists cases were expected to rise. His advice, get your booster, wear a mask, and if you're eligible, antivirals are available. But unless hospitals become overwhelmed,
we will not be reinstating a broad mask mandate at this time.
The numbers that are rising are much, much higher than what they were looking at.
Ontario's still awaiting updated modeling, but a global forecasting company crunched the data, noting this wave will be bad. When it comes to COVID hospitalizations, the upper limit of this 6th wave may be higher than the last one. In better scenarios, thousands will still end up in hospital beds, with admissions peaking in mid-May.
I've just been a bit frustrated because there is, in essence, a kind of cognitive dissonance going on.
Ahead of an election, some worry Ontario's no longer following the science. Doctors insist hospital staff are depleted. No one's asking for restrictions, but masks could easily slow down this fast-moving wave.
And it's very scary. You're putting people's lives at risk. And it's not even the mortality. We have to worry about the morbidity. No one talks about long COVID.
As soon as those masks came off, it was wildfire.
Danny Lurie's daughter caught the virus at school. It's disrupting classes and putting grandparents at risk.
By removing the masks that they've sort of put us back in the beginning position.
Ontario's chief medical officer says he strongly recommends people continue wearing masks. And if the risk from the virus changes, rules will change and he will let people know. But doctors expect it'll be too little, too late. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
A BC doctor we first told you about a couple of months ago has been suspended from practicing medicine over allegations he is spreading COVID misinformation. But as Lindsay Duncombe shows us, that doesn't mean he is stepping back from his message.
Oh, Canada, This is Castlegar, BC, last week. The crowd gathered to hear warnings from doctors against COVID-19 vaccines, including Dr. Stephen Malthouse, long accused of spreading COVID misinformation. His medical license was recently suspended while he's being investigated for stating medical conclusions without evidence, among other allegations. His message hasn't changed.
They're coming after our kids who are little, and we have to defend them.
CBC News followed the Doctors on Tour group earlier this year. Audiences heard Malthouse's allegations that the government and the media are misleading people and that COVID-19 vaccines are dangerous. Last month, the BC College of Physicians and Surgeons took the rare step of suspending Malthouse. It said there would be a real risk of harm to the public if Dr. Malthouse was permitted to continue to practice. The video from Castlegar is one of 8 similar ones posted Sunday. The meetings appear to have taken place in small BC towns this month. The videos are posted on the site Rumble because organizers say YouTube has begun to censor them.
I'm disappointed. I find it infuriating, but I'm not surprised.
Those that study misinformation and the law say now that Malthouse is no longer licensed, there are few tools left to stop him.
It does become more challenging when an individual is just holding meetings and spreading misinformation because, a doctor is held to a higher standard.
Malthouse didn't respond to our request for comment. He has previously taken the BC College of Physicians and Surgeons to court, arguing it does not have the authority to regulate his free speech. He seems to take pride in what happened.
I have 2 things that I really want to happen before I die. One is to get the largest stack of complaints at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in British Columbia.
And his audience responds. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, a fire today in Vancouver's Gastown district sent at least 5 people to hospital, and some who rent rooms in that still smoking 4-story building are unaccounted for. Susanna De Silva is at the scene of the fire. Susanna, can you tell us what's happening there and what you've seen?
Well, the smoke that's been pouring out all afternoon has now stopped, but fire crews are still here. You can see them continuing to work behind me, putting water on hot spots. You can also see the extensive damage of the building. The roof, you can see right through the sky at the top. Water still pouring down, and they try to get that fire under control. It is a 115-year-old building, so that may have contributed to the quick spread that has left some concern that not everyone escaped. The fire was so intense and widespread, witnesses say there wasn't much fire crews could do.
Around maybe 10 minutes, it became worse, like suddenly worse. And we went to the back alley, and I saw the fire, the real fire coming out. A front desk worker at the building said a small fire quickly got out of control.
There was a fire on the 2nd floor in the middle. Me and a tenant almost got it out. The fire extinguisher went dry. And then after that, it just continued like a sheet of newspaper. That's all I could do after that was run around getting everyone out. And not everyone made it.
Neighboring buildings quickly filled with smoke, and as people ran out, they saw and heard desperate pleas.
I started taking a video, but then I started to hear screams for help, like people were literally screaming for their lives. The fire was on the top floor, and I could see 2 or 3 windows open, and people were leaning out. They were coughing, spitting. They literally could not get out oxygen.
Fire crews were initially able to reach the first 2 floors until the fire pushed them out.
By the time I got from my unit to downstairs, all the screams had stopped. So people started to get really worried. They were urgently trying to get in between the trees and lift up the ladder so they could access them.
Several people were rescued from the top floor, several others taken to hospital, including one who had jumped from a window.
The ambulance and all the people were trying to help. They were breathing the oxygen.
Neighbors say false alarms were a common occurrence, while others had long worried about conditions inside.
I used to live in that building, and there were a lot of hoarders in that building. They pack up all this garbage in their rooms.
Pretty terrifying thing to have happened, Susanna. What do we know about the cause of the fire?
Well, fire officials say it's still too early to know at this point. They've, of course, been focused on putting that fire out. They'll be here working all night long. But a group of fire investigators have now arrived on scene, and they'll be working to figure out exactly how that started. Andrew?
Okay, Susanna De Silva in Vancouver. Thank you.
And police are now investigating following a house fire in Manitoba that left 3 people dead. It happened in Portage la Prairie, about an hour west of Winnipeg. One of the victims was a local student. Police say the deaths are suspicious. A man was taken into custody yesterday but has since been released.
Well, today at a Nova Scotia inquiry, an untold story of heroism. How an RCMP officer tried to protect the public just before she was shot and killed. Kayla Hounsell shows us how it happened during a 2-day mass shooting already in progress when the officer got to work that morning.
Constable Heidi Stevenson died in a gunfight, trying to take down the perpetrator after this violent crash. As the most experienced officer on her shift, she was in charge that Sunday morning.
It's not my place to comment on the degree of professionalism and courage that Constable Stevenson demonstrated that morning, but I think her actions reflect this more poignantly.
Stevenson arrived at 7 a.m. and readied her team, setting up checkpoints, asking dispatch for details, and trying to warn the public about Gabriel Wortman's replica police car.
Has there been discussion about a media release in regard to that vehicle, just for the public to be on the lookout for that?
The command post decided not to issue the release. An hour and a half after Stevenson's request, the RCMP tweeted this photo. But in that interim, 3 more people were killed. Then officers got word the gunman might be getting closer. So was Stevenson.
Who's approaching 224 and 2 there now?
That's me.
Copy.
But Stevenson didn't know it was actually the gunman. He approached Morrison and immediately opened fire.
I'm shot! Cell phone number 2!
Morrison was able to race away, but the gunman barreled towards Stevenson on a one-way road and the 2 collided. Stevenson got off at least 14 shots. Forensic evidence shows the gunman was likely struck in the head by bullet fragments. He was still able to kill her and steal her pistol. She didn't have a carbine, a semi-automatic rifle, because she had failed the training.
If there's any question about Constable Stevenson's qualifications or her abilities to do her job, they have been answered today. Full stop. Period.
The police union says there was no opportunity for Stevenson to use a carbine, even if she had one, and that her actions can only be described as heroic. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
In the United States, President Joe Biden is cracking down on what are sometimes called ghost guns.
Just basic common sense.
Now, ghost guns are unregulated and untraceable firearms that can be made from kits, or perhaps even more concerning, created from a 3D printer at home. Biden's new regulation would require background checks for owners and serial numbers for the weapons.
Well, winter might be officially over, but this was the scene today in Portland, Oregon. It's the most snow in April the area has seen in 80 years. And brace yourself, that same storm system is coming to Canada. Here's where it's headed. Over the next 48 hours, the storm will make its way north, bringing a major spring blizzard to southern Manitoba and parts of northern Ontario and Saskatchewan. Experts say it could be the worst in decades, and people are being advised to stock up.
This is all my supply for the whole week. I'm just hoping that this is not gonna happen.
Up to 50 centimeters of snow expected, along with strong winds. That's set to begin tomorrow night and last into Thursday.
A man in Saskatchewan is in jail, accused of burning down his family's house. But it's what led up to that has his family speaking out.
The term catch and release, that is what they do with mentally ill people in Canada.
Coming up, why they say their son did not get the help he needed and why they're not alone.
Plus, after a long pandemic, Canadians burned out at work, ready for change.
I think that COVID helped me see what's really important and have the courage to make the change.
And another airline takes off, fueled by the promise of low prices, but could there be turbulence ahead?
Canada is littered with the shells of old low-cost carriers.
We are back in 2.
CBC News, The National, named Canada's best national newscast at the Canadian Screen Awards.
Welcome back. As the focus of the war in Ukraine shifts to the east and the threat of major new Russian offensives, evidence of atrocities from cities in the north continues to mount. So our team in Ukraine captured these images in the city of Bucha. Investigators working at the site of a mass grave, digging up bodies buried near a local church, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. For some, what is coming out of Bucha is a painful reminder of the war in Bosnia nearly 3 decades ago. And as Stephen D'Souza explains, in the current allegations of war crimes, there are echoes of their own experience and lessons to be learned.
My first birthday with all my buddies.
These are the good times Senya Hotic holds on to from her childhood. She was just 11 when she fled the Bosnian War.
I remember trying to grab a Garfield pillow, and I think it was a Polaroid camera.
Now, watching images from Bucha and other parts of Ukraine brings back memories of the massacres in Bosnia. Close to 8,000 Muslim men and boys were killed in the Srebrenica massacre alone. What emotions do you feel as you're watching the coverage now?
Sadness, of course, lack of sleep, anxiety. I mean, anything you can think of. The horrors come later.
But while these images bring back painful memories, it's not the only parallel.
That was a stage.
Experts say Russian rejections of war crime allegations, deny, deflect, to blame others, is the same kind of propaganda Serbian forces used.
This idea that they want to make it so that they're muddying the waters and that popular sentiment in places like Canada and the US and Germany and elsewhere will turn against the idea of our government supporting the government of Ukraine.
He argues that recent events show Russia is committing not just crimes against humanity, but genocide. But Mark Skinner preaches caution. A retired forensic anthropologist, he spent years in Bosnia digging through mass graves, building evidence to prosecute war crimes.
You have to collect the evidence, preserve the evidence, show continuity of the evidence in order to bring it to criminal court.
Senya Hotic, meanwhile, hopes the war in Ukraine doesn't drag on as it did in Bosnia. Right now, she finds emotional healing through work. She's developing a cookbook about Bosnian food and culture.
I think when we kind of remember things in a healthy way, that's when the healing happens.
A long journey, she says Bosnians know all too well, and Ukrainians are just beginning. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, after contracting COVID herself in February, Queen Elizabeth recently met virtually with a former patient in London, sympathizing with the toll it takes.
I'm glad that you're getting better, and it does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it?
She also spoke to doctors and nurses at the Royal London Hospital and officially dedicated its Queen Elizabeth unit, which was built during the pandemic. And Canada is getting a royal visit in May. Prince Charles and Camilla will be here for 3 days as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, marking 70 years of service. They'll make stops in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Northwest Territories, and the Ottawa region.
Canadians say they are exhausted after working through the pandemic.
I was thinking nonstop. I was thinking in the middle of the night. I was thinking during dinner, and I found that I lacked the motivation that I had had previously.
Next, how some are battling burnout by changing course.
And later, the showdown over Etsy, why thousands of people are boycotting the popular online marketplace. Welcome back. Facing yet another wave of COVID-19, the number of Canadians reporting stress and exhaustion has skyrocketed. Some push back against burnout by simply quitting their jobs, but not everyone can afford to do that. Joanna Remiliotis looks at how Canadians are getting through it all.
Good morning, Hills Florist. Laura speaking.
When burnout set in, rather than persevere, Laura Sousa decided to pivot. A few months ago, she quit her job as a bank executive to work at her local flower shop and hasn't looked back since.
You realize that life is dear and precious and you want to make the most of it. And so I think that COVID helped me see what's really important and have the courage to make the change. Just put them in paper for you, or?
Sousa loved her old job, but once the pandemic hit, long days blurred into nights in front of a computer.
So you get, what, 2 weeks out of these, Connie?
She missed the face-to-face interactions with her team and could barely sleep.
I was thinking nonstop. I was thinking in the middle of the night. I was thinking during dinner, and I found that I lacked the motivation that I had had previously. Bye, Connie. Thank you. See you again.
When she mused out loud about working here, it helped her realize how much she needed a change.
I'd be sitting in a meeting and I would kind of visualize, like, if I was working in the flower shop right now, what would I be doing? And so that really helped me sort of be okay with it and realize, yeah, it's different, but I think it's something I'm ready for.
Chronic exhaustion among workers is at unprecedented levels, and people are making work changes like never before.
It's happening on a daily level, and people don't sit back and often reflect daily, how am I feeling?
John Trugakos is a workplace expert at the University of Toronto. He calls it a parallel pandemic and says according to the data he's tracked, up to 80% of the workforce in Canada has reported burnout in the last couple of years. From white-collar jobs to frontline workers, people are quitting in record numbers.
You know, they're burnt out, they're stressed, and it's not worth for them continuing on in that occupation anymore, so they have to find a way to alleviate the pressure and the stress and burnout they're feeling.
I might just quit because I can't take it anymore.
Madeline Ferguson has worked as a personal support worker in long-term care facilities for nearly 20 years and has never been this close to leaving.
It's changed a lot. We are scared, but what can you do? That's your job. And even I don't want to go to work, I have to. Who is going to look after all those seniors? And some of them don't have a family, and they all depend on you.
Ferguson says staffing is often short, and she's always afraid of getting her family sick too.
Mother, would you like cheese and crackers?
To ease the stress, she now works fewer hours, but the heavy workload and low pay makes her wonder how much longer she can hang on.
If we get more money, I might carry on for another year. And if not, I'm just going to quit.
The pandemic has forced a closer look at the value of mental health in general. And while there are promises to do more, from investing in healthcare to businesses shortening work weeks, 2 years in, fewer people are willing to wait for things to get better.
This feeling of being stuck and stagnant and this repetitive, almost Groundhog Day. What people have realized is they need change. They want change. They're looking for something more, something better, something more fulfilling.
Sharina Cruz is a career coach whose business has boomed in the last couple of years.
Now there's that additional interest and focus on, well, wait a minute, let me take a look at my whole life, my whole career, and really figure out, what do I want my future to look like? What's that impact that I want to have? And what does that mean when it comes to work?
For Sousa, it meant turning her back on a big title and a big paycheck. With the support of her family, she can afford to make the change, and she's grateful for that.
Having the ability to change something, and now I'm sleeping way better at night, it's very obvious that it was affecting me so profoundly that with that change, I can now, I'm healthier. I'm in a much better place.
Being in a happier, healthier place, Sousa says the pandemic has shown her it's the only place to be. Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
A family in Saskatchewan is speaking out about the mental health treatment their son received before he was charged with burning down their house.
I couldn't believe that the doctor would release him
Next, why they say this all could have been prevented. Two recent tragedies in Saskatchewan have revealed some serious problems with the mental health system. Two young men are now behind bars awaiting psychiatric assessment. One charged with second-degree murder in the stabbing death of his girlfriend. The other accused of burning down his parents' house.
So there's not really a whole lot we can salvage because everything is pretty incinerated.
Gone. Their house, their dog breeding business, their sense of safety. Angela and Clayton Erickson weren't home at the time, but say their adult son burned down their house during a psychotic episode 3 weeks ago. 18 puppies and dogs died in the fire.
We looked for Mom because I wanted to bury my moms and the puppies, but there's nothing left in the kennels.
29-year-old Colton Erickson is in jail, charged with assault and 4 counts of arson. Nothing has been proven in court, but his parents say he needs help.
Oh, he'd give his shirt off his back.
He's beautiful.
Since childhood, Colton has been diagnosed with a long list of mental disorders, most recently paranoid schizophrenia. A day before the fires, his parents called 911.
He was threatening to slice his daughter and my throats and was on a rampage in our house.
Angela recorded some of it before hiding in the closet with her granddaughter.
He had two voices. So he had one voice that was kind of saying that we were going to kill him, that he would have to kill us first. Then there was this little boy's voice. It sounded like just a little child saying, no, 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 don't kill my mom and daughter. I'll kill myself first before I let you kill my mom and daughter.
The RCMP confirmed they took Colton into custody under the Mental Health Services Act and transported him to hospital for treatment. But he was released within a couple hours.
I couldn't believe that the doctor would release him.
The Ericksons were sure the doctor would send Colton for psychiatric assessment and treatment. The Saskatchewan Health Authority won't say why Colton was released. His mother believes he was dismissed as a drug addict rather than treated as mentally ill. But there's also a serious staffing shortage at mental health facilities that's resulted in bed closures.
Unfortunately, we are seeing backlogs and pressures on the system across the country.
The head of the Canadian Psychiatric Association says the overburdened system cannot provide timely care or early intervention, and that leads to even more serious mental illness.
Having to respond to medical or psychiatric emergencies that might have been preventable, and that's using up resources and staff time that are in short supply already.
I have the hospital bracelets from when he went in.
Brian and Sandy Happ lose sleep over those missed opportunities. Their 25-year-old son is also in jail, accused of killing his girlfriend.
They were a great couple, very much in love with one another.
Thomas Hamp and his girlfriend, Emily Sanch, were together for 5 years. We're not showing her image at this time at her parents' request. Both studied psychology in university. She was finishing her master's degree in counseling, but their studies didn't help them navigate the mental health system. Before Christmas, Thomas revealed he was having intrusive thoughts. He believed people were spying on him.
He was worried that they were going to take him away and torture him and operate on his brain.
The young couple went to the emergency department.
Emily said she felt like she'd been really brushed off by the psychiatrist at the ER, like they just wouldn't pay attention to what she was trying to say.
In January, Thomas saw another psychiatrist and then back to the ER a second time. But Thomas's parents say he's always been smart and secretive. They're racked with guilt, wondering what more they could have done.
Because he's an adult and because of privacy concerns, for us to advocate was almost impossible.
One of the reasons they sent Thomas home without any result was because there was no indication of him being violent towards himself or anyone else. That was not a concern at all. And so it had been suggested to us that we actually lie and say we are concerned that he's going to hurt himself or someone else so that we would get more attention.
Thomas agreed to go back to the ER a third time. In preparation, Emily logged all of his delusions in this 4-page document so that Thomas's dad, Brian, could present it to doctors as evidence. But he never got the chance.
About 2:46 in the morning, I got a call from Emily.
The reason?
Help. Again, whatever was happening had happened, and somehow she dialed my number. And I didn't hear her, but I could hear Thomas screaming in the background that they're out to get him. They're over there, help me get them. And that'll stay in my memory forever.
He says Thomas had already stabbed Emily. That was February 20th. She spent 3 weeks in hospital, then died from her injuries. Emily's parents say it's too early to comment. Thomas has been charged with second-degree murder. Nothing has been proven in court. Now, Thomas's psychiatric assessment has been delayed because of staffing shortages at the province's main psychiatric hospital.
He's in a cell on suicide watch, still not getting any help. We were crying for it previously. Then the unthinkable happens. And no one's getting any help.
Angela Erickson feels the same way. After her son Colton was released from the small town hospital on March 15th, he issued more threats.
I was the effing bitch that did this to him, and that I was going to pay for this.
A psychiatrist prescribed medication, but within 36 hours, Colton is accused of lighting 5 fires in their small village and burning his parents' house down. He's also in jail, still unable to get a psychiatric assessment.
The term catch and release is, like, you know, with fish, that is what they do with mentally ill people in Canada.
Both men behind bars, their parents stunned but adamant that the mental health system needs resources and repair, and that their sons need help to keep them and others safe.
So, Bonnie, this is terrible. These stories certainly speak to what those parents refer to as the systemic failures. What are the professionals telling you might make a difference?
Well, experts say mental illness is very complex, so there is no quick fix. But there is consensus that Canada has a shortage of psychiatric professionals and that we need more of them as the demand for services goes up. And the provinces are competing against each other to recruit counselors, psychiatric nurses, psychiatrists. So while healthcare is a provincial matter, there is a desire to see more of a national effort to increase training spots, because ultimately early detection and treatment of mental health issues could potentially prevent the kind of crises you saw in our story.
All right, Bonnie Allen, thank you.
When we come back, a new Canadian airline with an old promise. What you need to know before booking on a discount airline next.
on the season finale of 22 Minutes.
Je m'appelle Harold.
You don't speak French, Harold.
What are you gonna do in war, maggot? Give everyone podcast recommendations?
I'm sorry, what? 22 Minutes, Tuesday at 8 on CBC and CBC Gem.
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast, Front Burner, the January 6th investigation is entering its final phase, with strange revelations and lots of unknowns about Trump and his allies. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, COVID-weary Canadians are more eager than ever to get away, and yet another discount airline is fighting for that business. Lynx Air promises cheap flights and no frills, but as Katie Nicholson tells us, others have promised the same and still ended up permanently grounded.
Taxiing up to a Toronto gate, the latest self-professed answer to sky-high ticket prices.
Airfares have been too high in Canada for way too long.
Lynx Air, with its aggressive growth strategy, now joining the likes of Flair, Swoop, and Rouge in the increasingly crowded low-cost carrier skies. All as another, Canada Jetlines, is poised to take off later this summer.
I think it's exciting. Anytime that we have more options in the travel marketplace, that's a good thing.
Travel writer Debbie Olson was on board another of Lynx Air's inaugural flights. She says low-cost carriers are great if you don't mind paying extra for carry-on and bags, but maybe avoid them if you're on a tight schedule.
If your flight is delayed or it's canceled, they can't just pop you on to another flight that day because they probably don't have another flight that day.
There have been others, of course. Canada 3000, Zoom, Jets Go, CanJet.
Canada is littered with the shells of old low-cost carriers.
Part of the problem, says this transportation professor, expensive Canadian airport and security fees. But there are other challenges.
The threats are the pilot shortages, and we've seen over the last few weeks large numbers of flights canceled because of labor shortages, largely pilots. I think that there are going to be environmental pressures.
In the short term, he says, Canadians can expect much cheaper prices for leisure travel. Lynx's CEO says her airline, with its fleet of brand new 737s, won't just survive, it will change people's minds.
Canadians perhaps think that low cost means low quality, and we don't believe that that's true. And we want to redefine the experience.
And at least for now, she has a terminal full of takers. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Thousands of the artists who use the online marketplace Etsy say the e-commerce company is charging too much in fees. And as Leanne Young tells us, they are pushing back with a strike.
Turning her artwork into buttons is one way Tricia Robinson pays the rent. She sells her creations on Etsy, but lately the Montreal artist has been frustrated with the e-commerce giant.
Their profit margin that they make from my work continues to increase and mine continues to decrease. And there's something not right about that.
Now the company is raising the fee it charges sellers from 5 to 6.5%.
The 1.5% increase, it does matter to me, and it's not because I'm not willing to pay for the service.
Robinson is joining thousands of artists around the world in boycotting the site for up to a week. Christy Cassidy is organizing the protest.
I felt like if we don't stand together and do something about it, this doesn't end with this fee increase. And it turned out a lot of people agreed with me.
Etsy has become the go-to selling site for craftspeople. With 90 million customers, it sold $17 billion worth of goods last year. It says the fee increase is justified and will benefit sellers by expanding marketing and adding more support staff, for example. In a statement, the company says, our revised fee structure will enable us to increase our investments in each of these key areas. Since Etsy went public in 2015, experts say they face pressure to satisfy shareholders.
Etsy has historically tried to foster a community that feels collaborative with its sellers, but since 2018 they've raised their fees twice, which suggests they're trying to perhaps profit at the expense of their marketplace sellers.
Boycotting the site will hurt Robinson's business, but it's a price she's willing to pay.
That's why I'm choosing to strike, because I think it's a really unique opportunity for people like me in a position like this to make changes and demand better from them.
Whether it will make a difference remains to be seen. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, after the break, an 8-year-old girl making big news in her Ontario town.
This is the Abbey Post, issue 18th, and the birthday edition.
We shall meet the founder of the Abbey Post in our moment. Next. Well, this is Abby Mitchell, maybe the youngest newspaper publisher in Canada. The 8-year-old initially started the Abbey Post to update her community on her dog Frankie's pulled muscle. But now it has become so much more than that. 18 editions later, the Abbey Post is a community staple, and that is our moment.
This is the Abbey Post, issue 18th, and the birthday edition. I was thinking about calling it
the Abby Washington New York Times.
Yeah.
She's 7 and able to walk up to somebody she doesn't know and ask them lots of questions is pretty surprising.
I think one of the most interesting things about the beginning of the paper was how immediately well received it was from folks in town, and that Abby quickly built up a regular drop-off list. For Abby, it made her feel really good about people being so supportive and so excited to see her work. And then through all this work, she's been learning about how people help other people in the community.
I really like writing and stuff, so I wanted to do something involved with writing, and I want to keep helping people.
Good on you, Abby. We like the Abby Post. This is a good
impressive.
name.
Yeah.
And she, we also like, she says she chose the color because she likes Tiffany blue and the New Yorker font. Right. Both excellent choices. And you saw her holding a certificate. She got a Junior Citizen Award.
Yeah, well deserved. And we should say there's some real substance to this newspaper, right? She also interviews someone new for every edition. She does a book review, I think, for each one as well. And she updates folks on the baby turtles in her backyard, is my understanding.
As you do.
That's The National for this April 11th. Have a great night.
Good night.